think, ladies and gentlemen, we'll start. Now, I'm going to introduce Clive, and it's easy to start off by saying Clive Lawton doesn't require any introduction.
Yes, Barry.
You all, that's right, you all know him. Now, the fact is, I looked at his CV, and my mind was blown. He's had such a wide range of experience and activities that I think I'm just taking a few of them out to tell you what you've got in front of you here who's going to speak. So, those of you know me know I wouldn't normally have any kind of piece of paper. I'd memorise everything. But this wasn't the case this time. It was impossible. So, what about his education? He's had masters in religious studies, management science, and in theatre and film studies. That's not bad to start with. Now, what about on the Judaism side? When it was then the chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, he was the founding executive of Jewish continuity. And in fact, that was when I worked with Clive for a couple of years, and I was privileged actually to work for him there. He was also the co-founder of Limud. Now, I think you all know what Limud is. It's an international Jewish education movement, and he was its director for 7 years. Now, on a slightly different side, he's been Bar Musaf and preacher for the High Holy Days, the Oxford Jewish congregation. Now, I take that wasn't the Chabad lot.
No.
Doesn't matter. Okay. He was executive director of the Board of Deputies, Community Relations and Education Departments. He was on the executive board of the Council on Christians and Jews, and I was on that outfit. And he's the chief executive of the Commonwealth Jewish Council. Now that spreads a certain number of things of interest. Now what about on the secular front? It'll interest some of you. He chaired the first official public inquiry into domestic homicide. He was an independent member of the Metropolitan Police Authority. He was chair of the North Middlesex Hospital and on the board leadership for the London NHS. His eyes are going up because he's my consultant geriatrician. And if I can get this thing over. And on the media and publishing, he's been a regular broadcaster on Radio 4's Thought for the Day. He was lead columnist for Jewish News for 10 years. He's published more than 15 books, the most recent being the definitive resource for GCSE Judaism. He's done children's history books on the Holocaust and Hiroshima, and ethical issues in 6 religious traditions. Now, that leads me quite nicely, actually, into what we're going to be dealing with this evening. In principle, he's got a 3-lecture series, which is entitled, Is Being Jewish Irrelevant to the Challenges of Modern Life? This is the first lecture, which is going to be split into 2 sessions. The first session is the scourge. Come in, Stephen.
Thank you.
Look, please sit down. There's some chairs at the back there.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll just repeat that little bit for you, not the whole lot.
Okay, thanks.
But please sit down.
Okay.
So this is Clive's, the first of Clive's lecture series for us in something entitled, Is Being Jewish Irrelevant to the Challenges of Modern Life? And this evening, we're splitting up the lecture into 2 sessions. The first one is the scourge of social media, and the second one is the feminism's unfinished business. Now, each of those sessions will be about half an hour, with about a quarter of an hour's questions and answers, and then we'll have a half an hour break for spread of food and you'll have the opportunity of mingling with Clive during that period. And after that, the second session, again a bit like the first, this one's called Feminism's Unfinished Business, and that'll have questions and answers, and we hope then that should take us round about to 9:15, 9:30. All very acceptable, and I hope it's going to be enjoyable. I know from knowing Clive that it will be thought-provoking, and you'll be thinking of questions when he's talking. So, the first session, Clive, the scourge of the social media.
Right, well, thank you for that, Perry. Thanks very much indeed. Well, Perry makes it sound very much more impressive than it's going to be. He calls it a lecture series. I don't know if it's even going to be a lecture, let alone a series. It's because I'm going to start, not least, with a question to you. How many of you are on social media? Hands up.
Minimally.
Couple of, 3, 4?
Minimally.
4.5?
Minimally.
Okay, what social media are you on?
Well, I had someone to do it for me because
Yeah.
I can't stand it. So I was on Twitter, I was on LinkedIn, I was on Facebook. I think there's one or two more, but I want nothing to do with it. So I gave her all the information and she used it to publicise me. That's it.
And that's it. Okay, all right. What about you, Michael? What are you on?
I have a Facebook account which I never post to,
Right.
but I get the odd message, and I am on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn and Facebook, okay?
Yes, those two plus YouTube. Which
LinkedIn,
WhatsApp.
Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah, I watched
And Twitter and WhatsApp.
WhatsApp.
Okay. Oh, you're looking like,
Are
oh,
you calling WhatsApp?
is WhatsApp social media?
I would say so.
Okay, all right, we need to come to a definition in a moment.
Yes, I've just been bullied into being on WhatsApp.
Bullied into being on WhatsApp.
And I
Sounds
was-
like the sort of thing people look forward to.
And I was forced to have a Facebook account for something I wanted to do something about 5 or 6 years ago, but I never used it.
Forced to, isn't it wonderful? Yes, I was forced to, I didn't want to, I was on it, I've had nothing to do with it. It's all so far. And you were going,
Well, Facebook, but only for messaging.
Facebook, but only for messaging. The rest of you are sitting there going, what? I don't understand any of this, right? So we've certainly got, to some extent anyway, and this, I was bullied into it, I only did it, I asked somebody to do it, I never use it, and so on. What this tells us is that we can choose, right? A lot of you have either chosen or not chosen to get involved in social media. I mean, some of you maybe have formally said to yourselves, I'm not doing that. But for quite a number of you, I would imagine it just kind of never crossed your minds. Why should I do it? What am I supposed to get out of it? Why bother? Right? So unless you have a reason, why would you get onto it? So some people have said, I was bullied into it, somebody else did it, I did it for work or whatever it might be. So there appear to be reasons. So we'll come to the reasons in a moment. So I'm going to try and divide this up into 3 bits, really. What are the benefits of social media? Why should we do it, or might we do it? What are the disadvantages of social media? This is called the scourge of social media. And then, is there anything that Jewish has to say about social media? Right? Or is this just kind of Jews go, I don't know, right? And we've got no guidance or help at all from our own tradition. So what are the benefits? Well, first of all, we know that social media in their different contexts, and people have mentioned LinkedIn, you mentioned YouTube, was it you that mentioned it? So you mentioned YouTube, you said, I don't know, is WhatsApp social media? So it is difficult to define what's included by social media, but more or less, social media are systems for engaging with other people through the internet. Let's say, roughly that. Now, of course, email does that too, but email is very direct. It's just a one-to-one and that's all. And so some people might say, well, the same is true of WhatsApp. But the freedom of WhatsApp means to say that it can be much more casual. right? If you're going to send an email to somebody, it's kind of sitting down and doing it. My dad, who passed away more than 10 years ago, used to call them memos, right? I got a memo from your cousin, and then he printed it out and showed it to me. It was an email, right? So an email is still a more formal thing, I think, than social media. Social media can be very casual, and any of you that use WhatsApp will know that you can just type in a brief message, what time you're coming on Tuesday, and you get a casual response, 6. It doesn't have to say, dear Clive, I hope you are well, lots of love, it doesn't have to do any of that. So I think social media are rather casual and informal systems, or they're mass systems to get out to a large number of people, right? If you wanted to broadcast an idea to a large number of people, how do you do that? Well, we know the old, duplicating something, posting it out, sticking up a poster. A lot of social media is effectively sticking up a poster somewhere or sending out a flyer, but to a large audience and doing it electronically. And then there are networks. So people have mentioned LinkedIn. This is Facebook for professionals, really, LinkedIn. It's a system whereby you join it, effectively. You have a presence in this thing called LinkedIn. You can connect up with all the other people who are connected to LinkedIn. And if you're a professional in this or that field, it's sometimes handy to be able to contact a lot of people who are interested in the kinds of things you're interested in. So you can certainly magnify your concerns or engage with people that quite possibly otherwise you just simply couldn't find. Instead of endlessly trawling through yellow pages or your address book, you can find these folk quite quickly. People have mentioned Facebook. Now, Facebook, quite possibly one of the largest of the networks, going out of fashion now. Some of you may remember things from the past, Friends Reunited and stuff like that. There were all kinds of social media which had collapsed, but Facebook seems to have got a scale that means to say that many people who are on Facebook don't want to come off it because they're then cutting themselves off from this scale of contact. You hear billions of people are signed up to Facebook. Right? Now, as you've already heard, half a dozen people said, well, I'm on Facebook, but I never look at it. So what that billions really means in terms of people who are actively involved in Facebook, we don't know. Right? I'm signed up to Facebook. My daughters said to me about 15 years ago, Dad, if you're not there, you're not there. Right? That's an important thing to remember. If you're not there, you're not there. If you want to be known, if you want to connect, and yet you refuse to be where people are, it's like choosing to be a hermit and say, nobody comes to me for my business, right? I mean, if you're not out there, if you're not giving people your card or something, how does anybody know where you are? I've certainly used Facebook to make contact with people who I just can't find anywhere else. Somebody who I used to know, or somebody who I suddenly think, oh, they could be, that could be their thing. I don't have their address, I don't have their phone number, I don't know. Go on Facebook, maybe they're there. And there's 47 Joe Cohens, right? And one of them in Kuala Lumpur, I don't think that's the one I'm looking for. Right? And eventually you send out to all 47. If you're the Joe Cohen I'm looking for, it's Clive here, let me know. And they go, oh, Clive, haven't heard from you for 15 years. That's social media, right? It's making contact with folk that otherwise you might have difficulty contacting. As a former teacher, I've had lots of former pupils come at me through Facebook. It's usually positive. come to me and say, what you said, or you helped me, or well, that's very lovely, isn't it? It's not a big deal, but it's very lovely. So social media facilitates interaction between people. Sometimes, and how much does that matter? I mean, it's nice, isn't it? It's nice to hear from your former pupils, but I'm not going to die if I don't. So it's pleasant, but it's not critical. Sometimes it's much more important than that. In a place where a a revolution is starting. Right? Social media is the quickest way of getting out to tell people what's going on. Now, of course, the authorities, sometimes oppressive, sometimes legitimate, want to kind of stamp on that and get a grip on who's sending these things to each other. The Chinese have successfully prevented Western social media operating really in China, but they've got their own social media structures. Of course, they know who's talking to whom, so that's quite useful to them, right? The great thing about WhatsApp, as far as that's concerned, is WhatsApp is what's called encrypted, right? And nobody can bust WhatsApp encryptions. So if you send a message to a family friend or anybody on WhatsApp, nobody else knows what you've sent. And nobody so far can get into it. It's the only one that is that, I mean, short of something super duper difficult to get to. It's the only sort of popular system that the governments can't break into. No, crooks can't break into. But these are systems for connecting with each other. The first time I came across Twitter, you mentioned Twitter, I think. I'm not on Twitter, although I do like the idea. Originally, Twitter used to require that you could not use more than 140 characters in your tweet, as a message is called on Twitter. 140 characters includes spaces or punctuation, right? So it's really, if you think an average word is maybe 7 letters, right? It's really not more than 20 words. I used to love the idea that this is the sort of last bastion of epigrammatic wit, really. You could just put it there. But of course, an awful lot of Twitter is not epigrammatic wit at all. It's I had eggs for breakfast, right? Not very interesting to anybody. But the first time I came across Twitter, Perry mentioned that I was on the Metropolitan Police Authority back in the day, and it was in the time when there were these anti-capitalist demonstrations, and people were tweeting to each other as to where the police were seeking to control the demonstration. And these anti-capitalist demonstrators were breaking out of the official march, or whatever it was, and dashing off down streets and smashing up shops and doing a sit-in in Portland and Masons and stuff like that. And they were using Twitter to do that, right? They were telling each other, the police are at the top of Oxford Street, go down to the end of Bond Street. So the police had to get into Twitter in order to see what was being said. You may remember that they started to kettle, you remember that expression? They started to kettle demonstrators, which was to try and gather them all into a space and stop them running off in every direction. That was called kettling, right? It was a strategy, which was more or less successful. But then the anti-capitalist demonstrators introduced a Twitter account called Suki. Now, if you remember the old nursery rhyme, Polly puts the kettle on, what does Suki do? Takes it off again, exactly. This was the anti-capitalists' rather witty response to kettling. Suki was a way of avoiding kettling. So Twitter is used in that, and then the police learned to start putting messages out in Twitter. So one I remember, for example, a demonstration happening in central London, and the police suddenly noticed that there were horse guards riding to, I think, Buckingham Palace or wherever they were riding to. And so they quickly put out a message saying any horses that you can see are with the horse guards, because the demonstrators were getting twitchy that the police were bringing in mounted police. Right? So Twitter was quite useful there in broadcasting information in real time, straight up, in ways in which a newspaper couldn't do. A radio can't do that quickly. You could do it there and then on the street in the moment. Right? So social media can be very useful in terms of getting in touch with folk. It can be very useful in getting a message out quickly. It can be very useful in networking people who otherwise would find it difficult to get together. Now, again, Perry mentioned that I was one of the founders of Limud, which we founded in 1980. I can't remember how we got a committee meeting together in 1980. I mean, how did we do that? We must have had to post a letter to people and wait for their responses. And I just don't remember how we did it. Nowadays, you want to fix up a meeting, you send out a doodle poll, people put in the dates, you find out which one's got the majority of ticks, you send that one out to everybody. It's done, right? And now we even know you can meet on Zoom. You don't even have to go into some place that people find difficult to get to, right? So there's all kinds of wonderful facilities that exist as a result of social media. So it's not all bad. Young people use social media far more than older people, as we know it. They're what we call digital natives. They've grown up with digital stuff around them. It's natural to them. It's not odd, it's not mysterious, it's very straightforward, right? It's how you live. In the same way, I remember my grandfather used to tell us to turn the lights off because you're, what was his expression? You're using up the globe. Right? By which I think he was still probably talking about gas, I think. Right? But he just hadn't moved on, and people didn't. Dad used to be quite worried about double declutching the car. Right? We didn't have to do that since he'd driven a military lorry. Right? But, so moving on is tricky, isn't it? Right? So we might find it quite difficult to get into the mindset of social media, but young people find it impossible to not be in the mindset of social media. There's an obvious way of doing things. Well, is there a problem? Is there a problem? I talked about the scourge of social media. Is it that? Or am I just being, if you will allow me the expression, am I just being an old fart? Am I just going, oh, it wasn't like that in my day, and something like that? Or am I actually addressing something which is a genuine problem? Now, we know certainly that young people can spend a long time on their phones or computers. Most of the time, if they're spending a long time on their phones and computers, they're on games, not social media. Right? Well, that's only the same as we used to worry, didn't we, about kids spending too much time on television. Right? Or, if any of you have had a son or daughter with a boyfriend or girlfriend at a distance, too much time on the phone. Right? So, I mean, teenagers have always spent too much time on something we don't approve of. Now, why worry about social media? So, first of all, the amount of time they spend, does that matter? Is that an issue? Right? They're going to spend their time on something or other. Well, of course, if they're spending their time on something we don't rate, then they're not doing something else that we do rate. Right? They're spending all their time on whatever it is, and they should be studying maths or something, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about should they be doing what we want them to do. We should be talking about, is it doing them any harm? Or is it doing them any good? Right? So again, I mentioned Limud. I remember being at Limud some years ago, and there were 3 young girls sitting round a table. I don't know how old they were, 13, 14 years old. And they all had their phones out, and they were all typing away. Right? And there were 3 of them together. And I went over to them and I said, forgive me, I'm very old, but it looks very odd to see the 3 of you sitting together and you're not talking to each other. Right? Isn't this proof of how antisocial this stuff is that you're all sitting and doing? And they said, no. There's 6 of us here. 3 here and 3 online. They included other people who couldn't come to Limud. So they were telling them what they'd done and where they were going and keeping in touch. And so, well, that's not bad, is it? I'd simply misread what was happening. They were being more social, not less social. And because the 3 of them sitting there could all see what they were each typing, they were all in the conversation. But was it a real conversation? Is this a genuine social encounter? Now, I'm on Facebook. I think I have 2,800 friends, 6 of whom I actually know. Right? because people say, will you be my friend? You go, tick, and they become a friend. I don't know who they are. There's people from Russia, you know, I don't know, I met them once when I went to Russia and they want to be my friend, and so there they are. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. When my birthday comes along, I get birthday greetings from any number of people I've never heard of, right? Well, it's not a big deal, and I'm not going to flatter myself that I'm so popular because 500 people have wished me happy birthday, right? But at the same time, the occasional happy birthday comes in from somebody with a slightly longer message that I haven't been in touch with for a long time, and that's quite nice, right? So when these three young girls were typing away here, and including their three friends who were not there, was this a more or less sociable encounter? Was this a genuine social encounter? Are some of those friends on Facebook, some of them, not all of them, but are some of them real friends? That is my friendship with them suffering or improving because I can contact them on Facebook? Right? Is it better or worse that I can contact them on Facebook? So there is that possibility that I could be constructing for myself an illusion that I think I have a social life and I don't. Now, you've probably all heard about dating apps as well. That's another sort of social media, right? You can go on a dating app. You can go, my name is John Smith, and I'm 6'3", and a bodybuilder, and, you know, date me, right? And I take a photograph from some magazine and put it on there, right? And hope that some hapless female will respond, get in touch. We arrange to meet, and she's got to try and hide her disappointment when she finally sees me, right? That's how it works. Is this any better or worse than the old system, where you had to go to some dingy dark dive in the West End somewhere, the music was too loud and you couldn't see anything, so you couldn't hear or see anybody, and somehow you were supposed to meet your ideal partner? I mean, it's not a good system either, is it, right? So, are things like, J-swipe, and, you know, J-swipe? That's Jewish, right? You swipe left or right if you like them or you don't. It's terribly superficial, isn't it? I mean, just going by a photograph, as opposed to the wonderful old system where you go to a dance and look across the room and go, I like her, and I mean, that's just as superficial, isn't it? Right? Just how to get started, isn't it? Right? So, again, we can be quite snooty about this, but it's no better or worse probably than most of the systems we used to have. And let's face it, we know that people of every generation have been just as bad at finding the right partner as current generations. It's not a clever thing either way.
Can we reply?
Yes.
What you haven't talked about is the monetising and the algorithm.
Yes. Well, I was going to come to that. So there are downsides in the sense that it's not as good as it's cracked up to be. But then most things are not in real life and virtual life. So in that sense, that's a kind of a false criticism, I would say. Right? There are other things, though, that are more harmful. One, famously, is what's called FOMO. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. FOMO. When you've got social media, you have access to, on a regular basis, instant information about apparently what everyone else is doing. Now, we all have that to some extent, right? Everybody's doing this, everybody's doing that. I'm not doing it. We grumble to our parents. You know, everybody's got one of those and we haven't. You know, and you don't know that that's not true because everybody's pretending to have one. But now we have into our own homes, onto our own phones, people claiming to be wonderfully fortunate, right? And frequently manufacturing the evidence of their good fortune. They're showing you how beautiful they are. They're showing you the high life they live. And this is frequently multiplying people's sense of dissatisfaction. I think it would be true to say that there is no evidence anywhere at all of anyone ever becoming happier because of social media. Ever. And there's lots of evidence of people becoming unlucky because of FOMO, fear of missing out. Other people are having this great thing and I'm not. Of course, it's not true, but it's very much more immediate than hearing about this in the school playground tomorrow, or going into the office and one of your colleagues saying, oh, we went on holiday to wherever. It's nowhere near as direct as seeing somebody on the beach having a great time and you can't afford to go. So I think this is a great source of unhappiness, fear of missing out, right? The comparison with other people's lives, the presentation by other people as to how lucky they are. And of course, everybody's lying. Everybody's lying. Everybody's exaggerating. 9 times, very few people will put out, I'm uniquely unlucky. Right? And now, of course, you can airbrush and Photoshop your pictures so you can look slimmer and more beautiful and more handsome and taller and, you know, whatever it is. You can show yourself playing the guitar like a maestro, right? All of that stuff, and you can't do any of it. But others will feel the jealousy that they can't do that either. Then there is cyberbullying, which is related to trolling. Trolling is a process whereby people jump in on somebody's communication. So a lot of this communication is comparatively open, right? There am I on Facebook. If I put out a general message saying, all of you should come to the demonstration that I'm organising against whatever it is, right? I want as many people as possible to see this, don't I? Right? But that immediately gives an opening for malicious people to pile in and go, you're a ghastly fellow, you should be shot, I wish you were blown up, you know, whatever it is they want to do. And there appears to be a remarkable release of inhibition on social media. This is an interesting thing. I wonder how naughty most of us would be if we were sure we wouldn't be found out. I've often reflected on this, you know, you're walking down the street and there is a empty shop, right? There's a big plate glass window and there's a sign up saying, due for demolition tomorrow. And there's a brick. Do we pick up the brick and chuck it through the window? Probably not. But why not? Because we're a bit afraid, aren't we, really? I mean, we'd love to chuck that brick through that window. Wouldn't that be wonderful? To see it smash a huge window, and I could do it. It's not hurting anybody because they're going to demolish it tomorrow anyway. Right? But it's tempting, isn't it? But maybe I'll get into trouble. Right? There's so much good behaviour based on maybe I'll get into trouble. Right? Not because we are virtuous ourselves. And so there we are with the brick and the plate glass window. Maybe somebody will see, you know, there are my fingerprints on the, I don't know, maybe I'll wait. Oh, I wish I had, you know. Right? There's some kind of anonymity in social media that leads people to just let loose. And I suspect that most people don't mean to do great harm, they just love the business of going, nah, 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 nah. It's ringing the front doorbell and running away. It's just kind of upsetting, see what you can get away with. Upsetting folk. Because no child who ever rang the front doorbell and ran away ever thought that there might be a baby trying to sleep in that house, or a disabled person struggling to the front door to see who it is. No kid wanted to cause that kind of distress. They just wanted the laugh of doing it. And I think a lot of trolling is triggered by that, oh, I can get away with it, nobody's going to notice me. Right? Because you can have anonymous accounts. Now, why should we have anonymous accounts? Shouldn't everybody know who everybody is? Until you try to organise a revolution in Russia. Isn't it great that nobody knows who everybody is in Iran? Right? So we don't want everybody to know who everybody is. So we're caught on the horns of that particular dilemma. So I don't think most people who get into trolling, who started off They're just kind of experimenting with what I can say and do, what I can get away with. And then it gets quite heady, because if you put something really ghastly on the social media, lots of people jump in and go, yeah, go on, do it, right? And you go, wow, I'm a popular fellow. Everybody likes what I'm doing. And people feed on likes, right? I've never had anybody notice me before. And now look, they love what I'm doing, and I could be more extreme. And they like that even more. And social media is constructed on multiplying intensity. There's positive and negative intensity, but intensity, right? So the more extreme you can be, the more likely you are to provoke a response. A response proves your inaction and notice. People send it on to other people. Have you seen what this chap's written? Right? And suddenly the world is interested in me. Now we have people on the planet with more social media followers than there are Jews in the world. Right? I mean, Donald Trump is one, but he's not the only one. Kanye West is another, right? With about 23 million followers. So when Kanye West says something, it goes around the world at speed. Right? And most of these people are just going, yeah, why not? They don't know, they don't care. But they just feed on the intensity of it. So cyberbullying is a small-scale version of trolling. Cyberbullying is usually quite local, and it's not very different to bullying that used to happen in school. The difference being, of course, that you carry the bullying back home in your pocket. So what used to happen, if you were unfortunate enough to be bullied, and there were always bullies, and there probably always will be, right? And probably, if we think about it hard, if we can remember somebody being bullied at school, it might have been us, but we can certainly remember somebody being bullied at school. We can probably remember not doing enough to stop it, right? Just being grateful it wasn't me, standing away, leaving it alone. It's not my fault. And anyway, they are a bit of a nerd anyway. You know, whatever. I don't know what our reactions were. But bullying went on everywhere, always. But when that kid left school and went home, it was a safe haven. I mean, occasionally the bullies might indeed turn up and bang on your door or push something through the letterbox, but generally speaking, home was safe. Indeed, not even home. You go into town and you're away from these people, and that's that. But with cyberbullying, they can follow you. Right? So that's really, really painful. The last thing, and I'm covering this field as fast as I can, is what you mentioned. There is the power of the billionaires. Social media is almost, well, is exclusively managed, owned by billionaires. Not owned by the state, not owned by cooperative companies. They're owned by rich men, in every case, I think. Now, that's not only social media. It's true about the newspapers. Not so true about electronic media, radio and television and so on, because we've got the BBC and things like ITV and Channel 4 are a bit more socially distributed. But certainly it's true of social media. And the billionaires are predominantly interested in making money, right? Let's be clear. They're not interested in social development. And if something will provoke more interest and make more money, then they will do that. And that is never, and I'm not making some kind of ghastly socialist, anti-capitalist statement here, but being interested in making money as your primary intent is never the best way to improve the social environment. Right? It might coincidentally be, it might turn out to be, who knows, but it's certainly not the point of the exercise. Last thing, before giving a couple of minutes for comments and responses, has Jewish stuff got anything to say about any of this? Hardly, but there are a couple of things worth bearing in mind. One is, you all are familiar with the very popular now articulation that Shabbat is a digital detox. Right? That on Shabbat, if you're observing Shabbat according to the halakha, you're not going to use all this machinery. And so for one day, you come off social media. Right? Now, the benefit of that is that if you are not doing this, then you have much less sense that it's essential to do it. That is, you exert some control over it. Now again, I mentioned my dad before. My dad was a quite heavy smoker. He used to smoke about 40 a day, I think, except on Shabbat. And so when finally his doctor said to him, you know, I don't know why you're smoking, you really ought to stop. After Havdalah 1 week, he didn't smoke anymore. And he said to himself, I can stop it on one day, I can stop it. Right? So Shabbat certainly gives you that opportunity to know that you don't need to. Furthermore, of course, if you are good at not worrying about what's on your phone for that day, then you are less worried about what is on your phone that day. You can ignore it. You don't have to pay attention to it. You take control. And the point of social media, like so many popular things, is to diminish your control over them. So certainly Judaism has that to teach if people are or want to be halachically observant or pick up that value. The other thing I think is Jewish teachings about lashon hara, bad talk, gossip, if you like. There's a lot that goes around on social media for which you have little or no proof. Now we know all these conspiracy theories and so on and so forth, right? One of the virtues of the concepts and the teachings around lashon hara is you really should not pass on stuff. For sure, if you have no evidence, but even then, you should be careful of the kind of reputation and sensibilities of other people. Now, if those principles were applied enthusiastically and intensively by Jews, I feel they would be very much less vulnerable to the negative features of social media. And then we could all benefit from the virtues of it. I tell you now, if you've got some long-lost cousin that you haven't been in touch with for the last 45 years, you're not really altogether sure where they've ended up, but you'd quite like to meet them, get on Facebook and see if you can find them. They might be there. Wouldn't that be nice? Or maybe not. Right? But it's a facility you can use rather than an addiction you can take on. So I'm going to stop there with that and see if there are any. Did that kind of pick up the point that you wanted to raise?
Well, particularly the feeding back of characteristics, targeting people,
Yeah.
picking out that they're interested in a certain subject and feeding them more good or bad.
Yes, because I think that people end up thinking, well, that must be right because everybody thinks that it's such and such. I mean, I have a friend from undergraduate days who is into every conspiracy theory that there is.
Yeah.
Because once you start looking at those and passing them on to other people, you suddenly get bombarded with these things and suddenly you feel, but everybody thinks that it must be right.
Well, thanks for that, because that's another advantage of being Jewish. Right? Jews know, or ought to know, that you should not believe a conspiracy theory. Right? Because Jews have been victims of conspiracy. You all know about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, for example. Right? And we know there was a leaflet produced back in the 1970s, I think it was, maybe early 80s, called Did 6 Million Really Die?
Yep.
It was a little leaflet, one of the first publicly articulated Holocaust denial things. And it made the argument fairly moderately, as it were. It didn't sound like a raving, frothing lunatic thing. It sounded like a kind of carefully argued thing. And in this, did 6 million really die? It quoted the Red Cross from their report on their visit to, I think it was Bergen-Belsen, categorically saying that there was no evidence of the deliberate destruction of Jews at this Nazi concentration camp. Right? Chapter through to 1946, whatever it was. Well, when I read that, I found myself thinking, why did the Red Cross get it so wrong? How could they have missed the evidence? I mean, I was led to believe that the evidence was inescapable. How come the Red Cross didn't spot it? What was going on there? Right? So I was a bit kind of shaken by that. The Red Cross just didn't produce such a report. It was just simply a lie. Right? Now, I'm supposed to be comparatively smart about these things, but when you say categorically that it says this, if somebody quotes the Encyclopedia Britannica, volume 7, column 3, page 40, what are you going to do? Well, I just don't think that's true. Right? So, conspiracy theories, the Protocols of the Elder Society, a good example. Somebody produces a book like that and says that's what they were saying amongst themselves. Why would you not believe it? You don't have any evidence one way or the other. Sounds convincing. Jews know that these kinds of big lies are told. That ought to protect us to some degree, vaccinate us slightly, inoculate us against conspiracy theories. It ought to. That doesn't mean to say that Jews can't just be as balmy as everybody else, but Jews also have a responsibility to not go with the crowd. Right? One of the functions, I'm telling you this now in case you haven't heard it before, one of the functions of the Jews is to dissent from the mass. Right? Our job...
And to question.
And to question, exactly. Our job is to say, wait a minute, everybody's saying this? Well, then why is everybody going in this way? Right? The reason for the Jews existing, every time somebody says, I think I've solved the problems of the world, if everybody were to do this, like I'm recommending, we'll all be happy. And the Jews go, I'm not sure, I don't think that works for us. I don't think we quite fit. You see it with political nostrums for universal solution. You see it with religious nostrums for universal solutions. Social nostrums for universal solutions. Jews go, it doesn't quite work for us. I'm afraid you haven't included us. Right? And that's why we get up people's noses. Right? If Jews stop upsetting people, we really have failed in our mission. Right? It's our job to make folk feel, wait a minute, have we included the Jews in this? You know, currently people are talking about how come nobody's noticed that Jews are also victims of racism. Right? You know, Jews don't count, as in David Mead's book. Right? He's right. Of course people haven't noticed that Jews don't fit because we don't fit the usual narratives. And that's our function, to not fit the usual narratives. To say, you think you've got it sorted, but you haven't, because you haven't included the Jews. You haven't taken the Jews into account. We are supposed to make the world feel uncomfortable. If we get that, then we become immune, or at the very least protected, as I say, inoculated somewhat against herd behaviour. Yeah, well, everybody might think that, but I'm not sure that we do. Everybody might think that, but I'm not sure that's for me. Right? And Jews ought to be from babyhood brought up to that, yeah, I know everybody's going that way, but I'm not sure I want to.
Yeah, say one thing there, Clive. I mean, in a sense, the whole basis of yeshiva education is to contrast the sages. Don't take anything for granted. It's the whole basis of our education.
It's fundamentally built on argument. Right, on argument and on dispute. My dad used to, I keep talking about Dad, don't I? He was a great man. My dad used to sometimes say, well, you know, that's a some saying. You know, some say. Some say this, some say that, right? So some say. All right? And there are lots of some says, aren't there? And that doesn't make it wrong, it makes it interesting. It provokes more thought. So, yes, we are, I mean, you say yeshiva education. I mean, to some extent, there are some elements of yeshiva mode which are very much about making people fit rather than not fit. But I would argue this is the gospel according to Clive, and as you know, all gospels don't have to be believed, right? But my position is that Jews are certainly supposed to question, they're supposed to argue. If somebody stopped arguing, you need to kind of provoke them a bit and go, well, did you not notice what was wrong with what I said? Right? You need to get that going. Kids have to be encouraged to argue. You know that English thing, children should be seen but not heard. What Jew ever thought that? Right? Just kind of... so, yeah, and sitting around the dinner table, there's a bunch of adults all having a fine conversation. A little 3-year-old schnip goes, yeah, but... And everybody goes, yes, darling, what is it? Right? You go, shh, he's got nothing to say. But no, we have to listen to him. We train him up into saying his piece or her piece at the table. That's a very important, I think, very important mode for encouraging young people to be sceptical of things that might try to herd them. That's true about fashion, it's true about all of those things that young people are potentially victim to. Yeah.
But do you think that this process can be used by outsiders to swing elections and elect the wrong president and all sorts of...
Trump.
It absolutely can, of course it can, because you've got a mass media system. Now, by the way, it's not only social media. In the past, you know, they could get out a leaflet or the Protocols of the Old Society, they could get it out there, and if enough people picked it up, and it's picked up by the newspapers or by the unions or whoever it might be, people might believe that. We know more than enough examples of where a rumour has run. Rumours are, I mean, after all, social media is just a system for delivering rumour, some of which are true, some of which are not. So rumours have run. That's not the crime of social media. And people have been elected on the basis of ostensibly false assertions. Well, I mean, we've just been through half a dozen prime ministers, haven't we, on that basis?
3, actually.
So, you know, different people claiming different things which others have been swept along with until you stop and think about it. You know, we're all party victim to that. To some extent, one might hope that social media is potentially a democratizing process, whereby the truth will out as well. Right? Because we hear of the presentation of lies and conspiracies, we underestimate the capacity of social media to also distribute truth. Right? It's not a function of social media that it only deals in lies. Right? So, I mean, I don't know how Partygate, for example, got out there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was somebody putting up a photo on social media or somebody leaking the information on social media and it gets out there. Right? So we find out stuff. And one of the reasons why we know so much more, it's so much more difficult to be a public figure now. We know so much more because social media leaks this information. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Clive,
so of itself, it's not bad. It's what we do.
I think we're overrunning a bit.
Yes.
But this part I found particularly fascinating, actually. I think we better call the Q&A stop now.
Yeah.
Let's have a break. Let's go and have something to eat.
Yeah.
And